Okay, so this week we're going to be looking at inserting advanced functions and create scenarios. So please go to Fanshawe Online, download the file exl06_payroll. You'll actually see when you get in there, there are four tabs plus the topics. So let's just take a quick rip through what we're going to be covering off. Skill number 1, modify text using text functions, pretty straightforward. Skill number 2 is paste options, which again is fairly straightforward. Skill number 3 is the VLOOKUP function. And this is probably one of the more difficult functions that you're going to be covering off in the course. It's one that quite often people are looking to if you're being tested for Excel when you go for your job interview or what have you, VLOOKUP is probably one of the functions that will be included in that sort of a test. Skill number 4 is the AND and OR functions, which allow you to do multiple logical tests. Count A and count if in skill number 5 to allow you to add cells based on a condition. Skill number 6 is the first of the 4 what-if analysis tools we're going to be working on. Skill 7 is using the future value function. Skill number 8 is array formulas, which quite often aren't, you won't see that very often in Excel, but we'll cover it just so you're aware of what it is. Skill number 9 and skill number 10 are sum if, average if, sum if s, and average if s. And again, we'll be spending a fair amount of time on that. This week's lesson is probably the most difficult lesson in the course. There is a lot to cover, and so I recommend that you take the time, work through all the different tools that you have available to help you with this, read through the content in Fanshawe Online, use the conditional or the skill-based training in My IT Lab to work through the different skills there as well. As I say, it's a difficult week. So let's just get started. Okay, so we're going to slip over here to the well, let's just take a look at the spreadsheets first. So we have a spreadsheet, a worksheet here called payroll. What we're going to be calculating here is the payroll for city residents. We're going to be using some text functions to fill in the names here and here. We're going to be calculating total allowances, so you can see this is the term that the person has been a member of City Council. This is their monthly salary. This is their stipends, so if they're a member of the RA redevelopment agency, they're going to be getting certain stipends. If they're a part of the housing authority, they get a different stipend. Auto allowance, we're then going to calculate our total allowance. Our gross wages is how much money they're making in a particular week. The federal tax, we're going to use a VLOOKUP to look up the federal tax. So based on $1,100 a month, their taxes are going to be 22%. We're going to use, as I say, use the VLOOKUP function to find their wages in that table to find the interest rate or the taxation rate that they're going to be charged. Health insurance is just a fee. Retirement is how much they're contributing to their retirement pension. And again, we're going to be using their term to look up the retirement rate that they will be contributing based on their term in office, and then their net wages. Okay. All right, we're going to be doing a bunch of other calculations here to see how many times served, or terms served. So how many people are served 1 term, 2 terms, 3 terms, and 4 terms. Based on your contributions to your payroll, we're going to take a look and calculate what your income or what your retirement pension will be worth at the end of 20 years at an interest rate of 4.8%. Okay, so as I said, a number of different concepts to work through on today. So we're going to start in the employees table. So what we have here is a list of all the employees in the organization. They've got their first name, their last name, office, phone number, department, hire date, so on and so forth. So we're going to start off, the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to calculate their full name. So basically I have their first name in B2, their last name in C2, and what we want to have in M2 is their full name. So here we want it to show Candy Ferry. So to do that, we are going to use the first of the text functions. So if I go up to formulas, text, Now, text functions are functions that are used to deal with text, of course. So there are a number of different types of functions that you can use here. You can look at, you can see as you go down through the list. Today we're only going to look at one function, actually two functions, concatenate and proper. Now, this is one of the things you've got to be careful with. I'm currently running at home with Office 365. In Office 365, the concatenate function has been replaced with the concat function. So the concat function does the same thing as concatenate. You can use either. So if you have an older version of Office, of Excel, you may not have concat. You may have the function called concatenate. So you can use either function to complete your work. So what we want to do here is I want to concatenate, which means to join two text strings together, their first name and their last name. Okay, so let's get started. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to go to text functions, I'm going to go to concat, and you can see that it shows me the text strings that I want to join together. You can see it says concatenate a list of range of text strings. Text 1, text 2 are 1 to 254 text strings that you can join together. So the first one we're going to join in is their first name. Now understand that concatenate is very literal in how it works. So if I was to put the last name in here, I would have Candy Fenny with no space. So what I need in the second text string is the space. And to do that, I go double quote. Keyboard set up to English Canada. Hold on. Okay, so I'm going to go double quote, space, double quote. Okay, so what I have now is the word candy, a space, and then my third text string is going to be the name Fenny. All right, when I hit OK, you can see that I end up with candy space Fenny. Now what I also want to do is I want that to be in proper notation. Proper notation is a capital on the first letter, lowercase on the next, capital on each word. To do that, I am actually going to create what is called a nested function, which is a function inside a function. To do that, in this case, the simplest way to do it is put your cursor up on the formula bar, and in between the equal sign and the C of concatenate, you're going to type in proper bracket, and then you're going to go to the end of the function and you're going to put in another bracket. Okay, so let's take that function and break it apart. Understand that Excel always works with bedmass. So what bedmass says that when you have brackets, it'll do the brackets, and it works from the brackets from the inside out. So if you have two brackets, it'll do the inside brackets first, and then it'll do the outside brackets. And that's important here because, as you can see, we have two opening brackets and two closing brackets. So the concatenate function is inside the inside the first set of brackets. So what this is going to do is it's going to do the concatenate function. It's going to evaluate that. It's going to come up with the words Candy Fenny, and then it's going to take the proper function and apply that to the text that it has. And what it will do is, as you can see, that your end result is Candy space Fenny with upper and lower case. Okay, so just to recap, we did a concat function first to join the two strings together, and then outside of that we typed the proper function to change the inside values to proper notation. I am going to show you a shortcut. I could have done it all typing it in instead of using the insert function. I could say equals proper bracket concat bracket first name comma the space comma the last name, and then I need two end brackets. The first end bracket closes off the concat function, and the second one closes off the proper function. Okay, and just to confuse you even more, there is a shortcut as well that you can do. Instead of using concat, you can use an ampersand. So I could go equals proper bracket, point to the first cell, use an ampersand, and then my space, then an ampersand, then my last name, and my double quotes. Sorry, just a single quote then. And that will work as well. So equals proper B2 ampersand, the space, ampersand, and C2. All right, so you could do any of those. The simplest way is probably to use the concat function, then go up to the formula bar and add the proper function. Now I want to copy that formula down, or that function down. And to do that, I'm going to simply double click on the fill handle, which will carry that function all the way down to the bottom. All right, so that is skill number 1. Skill number 2, we want to paste options to change underlying values. So what they're asking you to do here is, if you take a look in your data here on the, you can see that the first 5 people are the members of City Council, and that's all we're doing our calculations for on the other worksheet. So I'm going to copy just these names. So I'm going to hit copy on the home tab, or I could do Control C, or I could right click and click copy. And then I'm going to go over to the payroll worksheet and I'm going to paste that in here. All right, and I'm simply going to click on paste, or I can do paste. And notice what happens is I get a bunch of #ref errors. And that's because what's copied over is the formula. Remember, the underlying value gets copied, or not the displayed value. So if I go back to my employee worksheet, you can see that what is actually in those cells is this formula up here. So when I copy it, because of relative addressing, it changes those cell references, and that's why I get a reference error. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into here and I'm going to click on the, I can't do that here. All right, I'm going to start over again. It's just because I dicked around by moving to different worksheets and stuff. So I'm going to go back over here to employees. I'm going to highlight the range. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to go back to payroll and I'm going to paste it. And then I'm going to click on the paste options button, and I'm going to say I don't want to paste the underlying value, I want to paste the displayed value. And then what it will do is it will paste the displayed value. So instead of copying the formula, it's just going to copy the names. I'm going to do the same thing down here. All right, so I'm going to paste, and I can actually do it all in one step here from a right click. I can click on paste values to paste the values. Okay, so that's skill number 2. So skill number 3 is now we're going to start on the VLOOKUP. So basically what we want to do here is I want to put in here a federal tax that is based on where that tax, the amount of money that they've earned. And again, everybody who has worked for a living has come across this. You work, depending on how much money you make, you are going to be in a certain tax bracket. So if you're making over X dollars, you're at one tax bracket. If you make more, you're maybe in the second tax bracket, and so on and so on and so forth, depending on how much you're making and depending on the tax codes and so on. So what we need to do is, if you were doing this manually, here's what you would be doing. You would be saying, I'm going to look for this amount, $1,100. I'm going to look for it down here. I'm going to find that 1,100 is bigger than 1,000 and less than 1,500. So as long as somebody's making 1,000 or more and less than $1,500, their tax rate is going to be 22%. Okay, so we are going to be using Excel to do that for us. And the way I would explain it is that if you think about Excel, the VLOOKUP function, it's what am I looking up? In this case, I'm looking up $1,100. Where am I looking it up? Well, I'm looking it up in this range of cells. When I find it, I'm going to go read across. So why am I looking it up? Because I want the tax rate, and the tax rate is right over here. Okay, and then there's a further thing that says either an exact or an approximate search. So this is an approximate search because I'm looking up a range of values. I'm looking up between $1,000 and $1,500. So I'm going to have an approximate search because as long as it's greater than 1,000 and less than 1,500, my tax rate is going to be here. If I look at the second number, 850, that's bigger than 500 but less than 1,000, so its tax rate is going to be 18%. Okay, so what we are doing is we're looking up the gross wages in this range of cells. When we find the correct one, we read across to find the value that we want. Okay, so we're going to put that value in here. So here we're going to use the VLOOKUP. So I'm going to go here to lookup and reference, and I'm going to go to VLOOKUP. There's two versions of this. There's a VLOOKUP, which looks vertically, and there's a HLOOKUP, which looks horizontally. Most of the time, I've only ever used the VLOOKUP, but the HLOOKUP works the same way. So the lookup value. Think of a telephone book. In a telephone book, what you have available to you is a name. And then based on that name, you go and pull the correct phone book. So if you're at the library and you're looking for a phone number for somebody in Vancouver, you'd pull the Vancouver phone book. And then you would look up the last name. When you find the name that you want, you read across to find information about that person. So there may be their address, maybe their phone number, their postal code, and so on. Okay. This works exactly the same way. And the important part here is that the common piece of information is the piece of information that you know. You know the last name, and the last name is the first column in the book that you're looking it up on. In this particular case, what we're looking up is we're looking up the gross wages. And that's the common piece of information. So the table array is where you're looking it up. Well, I'm looking it up in this range of cells. Okay, so, and we're going to do one more thing. I'm going to hit F4 on that to make that absolute. I'll come back to that in a second. Once I find the value that I'm looking up, the $1,100, I'm going to read across. So this is column 1. Column 1 stores the gross wages. Column 2 shows the tax rate. So where am I looking it up? The value that I want is coming back from row or from column 2. Column 1 is always the common column. All right, so that's the column that you have that joins what you're looking up and to where you're looking it up. Once you find it, then you're going to read across and you're going to pull off column 2 in this case. It doesn't have to be 2. You could have 15 different columns that you're looking across to find things about that person. And we'll spend more on VLOOKUP next week to reinforce that. And then the final piece here, this is range lookup, and if you read down below, it says range lookup is the logical value to find the closest match in the first column, sorted by ascending order, true or omitted. Find an exact match is false. So what the important piece here is that in this particular case, we're doing an approximate search. Right? We're not searching for an exact. We're going to use an exact match for the next one. So my range lookup here is either the word true, or I can leave it out. Okay. Now let's go back to the table array. Remember what happens here. So basically, remember we're calculating this particular tax rate for Candy Finney. So row 5. Remember, when I use the fill handle to copy a formula, it's going to adjust all these references. So it's going to change H5 to H6 when we start looking up Dexter Medice. And when we're looking up Ignacia Maris, whatever, we're going to be looking at H7 and so on and so forth. So if you look at your lookup value, H5 has no dollar signs on it. However, the range where you're looking it up, B14 to B17, I need to have that as an absolute reference. I cannot let Excel change that range of cells, because if I did, it would look up H6 in the range of B15 to B18, of course, which is incorrect. So your table array must be an absolute reference. And I'm going to click OK. What the heck happened there? Oh, I must have screwed up something here. Hold on a second. So I'm looking up this in B14 to B17. Column index is 2. True. All right, start over again. So date look up a reference, VLOOKUP. What am I looking up? I'm looking up this. Where am I looking it up? I'm looking it up here. F4 to make it absolute. Column index, I want to return column 2, and I want that to be true. Okay, I'm officially a goof here. What I did wrong was I'm going to start over again, look up and reference, VLOOKUP. So what am I looking up? I'm looking up this. Where am I looking it up? Well, I'm not just looking it up in the first column, I'm looking up the total table. Okay, because I have to know, it has to know anyway. So that I'm going to make F4. My column index is 2, and I'm going to type in this as true. Okay, so again, to look at this, what I'm looking up is H5, the table array, and is the value to be found in the first column of the table can be value, reference, or text string. So when I'm looking it up, it's looking up H5 in the array B5 to B or B14 to B17, but I have to include the columns that are going to be referenced as well into that. Okay, so there's my 22%. Now, unfortunately, that's not done. We're not done yet, because all that is giving me is the tax rate itself. But what I'm looking for is the actual amount of tax they're going to be paying. What they're going to be actually paying is their gross wages times that 22%. So to do that, I'm going to go back up to the formula bar, and I'm going to multiply that 22% again by the gross wages to get my $242. And I'm going to copy that down. Okay, so let me just go through that whole thing again. So I'm going to go to select the cell, look up and reference, VLOOKUP. What am I looking up? I'm looking up the gross wages. Where am I looking it up? I'm looking it up in my table. Then I'm going to hit F4 to make that an absolute reference. I want to return whatever happens to be in column 2, and I want it to be an approximate search, so I put in true. That gives me my tax rate. Then I have to go back and then multiply the tax rate by the actual gross wages to come up with their annual pay, or their weekly contribution for income taxes. Okay, all right, so let's do the same thing now to figure out the retirement rate. The retirement rate is down here, and it's based on the terms. So somebody who's been a one-term counselor is going to be paying 8%. Somebody who's 2 years is going to be paying 11, 3 years is 13, 4 years is 15. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go to lookup and reference, VLOOKUP. What am I looking up? Well, I'm looking up their term. Where am I looking it up? I'm looking it up in that table, and I'm going to hit F4 to make that absolute. When I find the correct one, I'm going to hit column 2, but this one here is an exact match. So I'm going to type in here false. So what an exact match means is that I must find exactly, so the first one is a 3, so I have to have an entry in here for number 3. Okay, so when I hit that, and then I'm going to do the same thing, I'm going to multiply that by their gross wages to come up to their contribution that particular week, and I'm going to copy it down. So let's talk a bit about why you need an exact match. In this case, we have terms, the retirement rates are based on 1, 2, 3, and 4 terms. Now what would happen if I had an employer or somebody who had actually done 5 terms? So I'm going to select one of these, I'm going to change it to a 5. Well, if they had 5 terms, we don't have a tax rate for them or a retirement rate for them. So I want the VLOOKUP to return an error. I want it to come back and say, hey, wait a minute, this guy's here for 5 terms, we don't have a rate for that, so there's an error somewhere. Either it shouldn't be 5, or the tax term should have a 5th one in it. Or sorry, the retirement rate should have a rate in here for 5. Okay, so that's why you use an exact match, because you want it, if I use an approximate match, then it would simply have returned the 15% for 5 as it does for 4, because it would say it's bigger than 2,000, but it's less than whatever, so it'll drop back and pick up the last number. So exact is, and quite honestly, I think exact is used more often than approximate, but you can see you use approximate all the time for things like rates and what have you. Okay, so that is skill number 3. Skill number 4 is edit conditions in logical functions. Okay, this one's a little bit more interesting to try and come up with here. So what they want us to do here is they want us to put in here either true or false if they're high benefits, true or false if they're high value. So in effect, it's an if statement. So what they're saying here is, where are we here? I got the right ones here. Okay. So an employee is classed as high benefits if their health cost is greater or equal to 255 and the retirement cost is greater than 125. Okay. So if the health cost, which is here, is 255 or more, in which case, so if I look at Candy Fenny, that's not true, and the retirement cost is at least 125. That is true. So this is false and that is true. But what they want us to do here is they want to track somebody as high benefits if they're both true. If that's true and if this is true. Now, I could have used an if statement if I was only testing for one thing. So if I was just testing for a health cost, I would said if this is greater than 255, then true or false, I could use an if statement. But I can't do that with more than one logical test. The if statement will only work with a single logical test. So what I need to use here is a function called AND. And the AND function will test multiple logical tests. If they all come up as true, it will return the word true, and if any one of them is false, it'll return the word false. The OR function will test multiple logical tests. If any of them are true, it will return the word true, and it'll only return the word false if they are all false. Okay, so I'm going to go down to here, and I'm going to bring the AND function. So the AND function is in logical. So here it is here. So you can see logical checks whether all arguments are true and returns true if all arguments are true. And you can have up to 255 of them. So what we are testing for here is that health cost is greater than or equal to 255. And you can see that that's false for this first column. And let's see here. K5 and retirement is greater than 125, and that's true. But because the first one is false, it's going to return the word false. Okay, so there's my formula, and J5 is greater than or equal to 225 or 255, and K5 is greater than 125. I'm going to copy that down, and you're going to see that the last two people, because her cost is $503 is her health insurance, so that's more than 255, and her retirement is more than 125, so those return as true. Okay. For the high value is if their term is greater than or equal to 4, or their retirement is greater than their current retirement, which is down here, is greater than 30,000. Okay, so I'm going to use logical OR, and I'm going to look at term. So for Candy Fairy, we're going to say term is greater than or equal to 4, or current value of their pension is greater than 30,000. Now, because both of those are false, it returns false. If I carry that down, you can see that the only two that are there, so the last two people are this person here, Maria, is 4 terms, so that's true, so we don't even have to test the second one because it's true anyway. The last one, the term is not greater than 4. However, her contribution, her pension is $32,000, so that is high value. Okay, so that's basically the way the AND OR function works. You can also use multiple ANDs and ORs in an if statement to create an if statement that tests for more than one thing, but we're not going to worry about that at this point in time. Okay, So skill number 5, describe the purpose of count A. So count A, we've looked at, remember last week, I think it was last week, we did the count function 2 weeks ago. Well, before the test. You did the count function to count the number of cells in a range that had a number in them. And I also talked about count A, which counts the number of cells in a range that has anything in them. So that's basically what we're going to do first here for the count A function. And we're going to click on B11. So we want to know our total number of employees. So to add up my total number of employees, I'm going to say there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 employees. So I'm going to use my count A function. That's over here in more functions, statistical. And I'm going to count the number of people that are in that range. So that's going to count all non-blank cells. If I was to delete one of the cells, you would see that the number would change. Okay, so that's count A, which is basically pretty straightforward. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go down here to F14. And now what I want to know is I want to know how many people have served one term. And then how many people have served 2 terms, 3 terms, and 4 terms. Now in this situation, it's pretty straightforward. You can go up here and say, well, nobody has served 1 term. I've got 1, 2, 3 terms, 2, 2 terms, and a 1, 4 term. Okay, so when I've only got 5 rows, it's a piece of cake. But if I had 5,000 rows and I wanted to count certain things, then I couldn't. It would be much more difficult to do it manually. So here we're going to work here, and we're going to work through the COUNTIF function. So I'm going to go to here, statistical. COUNTIF is here, and here's what COUNTIF does. It says look in a range for a criteria. Okay, the way I would explain this, let me just turn this off for a second. If anytime you're trying to work through a function, you're trying to understand how it works, think of it logically. The example I use in class is to say, if you've got a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old at home and you're trying to teach them to brush their teeth, you don't hand them a toothbrush, point them at the bathroom and say, okay, go brush your teeth, because they have no idea what the hell you're talking about. You need to be able to explain to them step by step exactly what they have to do. Okay, you have to say, all right, here's the toothbrush. We're going to go to the bathroom. You're going to turn on the water. You're going to get the toothbrush wet. You're going to open the toothpaste. You're going to put a little bit of toothpaste on the toothbrush. You're going to close the toothpaste. You're going to get the toothbrush wet. You're going to then brush your teeth in a certain way. When you're done, you're going to clean off your toothbrush, and so on and so forth, right? You have to explain it logically step by step so that they can learn it. And Excel is exactly the same. Excel, everything is logically laid out, but Excel can't do anything by itself. Somebody had to design all of these functions and so on and so forth, and it's the same thing here. So logically what you would do is you say, how many have served 1 term? Well, I'm going to go and look up in this range of cells, and I'm going to say, nobody. Okay, how many have done 2 terms? Well, I'm going to look up in here and say, well, there's 1 and there's 2. So 2 people have, and so on and so forth. So the SUMIF function, or the COUNTIF function, works exactly the same way. All right, so let's go back, bring up the COUNTIF function. Okay, so it says range is the range of cells from which you want to count the non-blank cells. So there's my range. And my criteria is, what am I looking for? Well, I'm looking for whatever happens to be in this particular cell. Okay. Now, again, I'm going to go up here again, and I'm going to highlight that, and I'm going to hit F4 because that has to be an absolute reference. All right. So you can see here, so again, if I bring up the function, you can see I'm looking in the range of B5 to B9 for whatever happens to be in cell D14. This has to be an absolute reference because I'm going to copy that formula down to the next row, and when I copy it down to the next row, D14 is going to become D15, and so on, but my range has to stay locked in. So now when I copy this down, this one here is looking in B5 to B9 for whatever happens to be in D15, which is the number 2. So it's pulling off that there are 2 people with 2 terms, there are 2 people with 3 terms, and there is 1 person with 4 terms. Okay, so that's how the COUNTIF function works. Okay, skill number 6. Hold on a second. I'm not sure if this is, I hope I did. I hit pause at one point, and I've done this before. I've gone through and done the whole lecture and realized that I forgot to unpause it and had to do it all over again. So we'll see what happens here. If you hear this, then it was working okay because I didn't have to re-record. Skill number 6 is perform what-if analysis using Scenario Manager. What-if analysis is to me, is the end result of what you should be doing with what every spreadsheet really is trying to do. It's trying to make decisions based on the values, the numbers you have in front of you. So what-if analysis is, the beauty about Excel is that because you're making formulas that are based on cell references and not the actual contents of the cell, you can change those contents and see what the change in that content does to your assumptions. So with Scenario Manager, what we're going to do is we're going to be able to take a look at a number of different assumptions and have them side by side. There is nothing we're doing here that we couldn't do step by step, and we'll come back to that in a second. So we're going to look at K5. All right, so K5 is your retirement rate based on the values in, so this number here, this $143, was calculated by looking up their term in this table of values. So if the retirement rate changes, then the amount of contribution they're going to make into their pension is also going to change. Okay, so what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to take a look at to say, well, what if we were able to go to a different supplier? So instead of going to Sun Life, we're going to go to Manulife or somebody else. They're going to give us slightly different rates for the same sort of a benefit. What is that? What is the end result of that going to be for us as a company? Okay, and for the employees, because if we charge them more, we could have problems with people not wanting to pay the extra value unless you can prove that they're going to get more value in retirement, and so on and so forth. So any changes in the retirement rates is going to change the amount of money that the person has to contribute each month. Okay, so I'm going to select my retirement rates here, and I'm going to go to the Data tab, and I'm going to go over here to What If Analysis, and you can see that there are 3 things in here for What If Analysis. There's Scenario Manager we're going to do today, there's Goal Seek we're going to do next week, Data Tables we're going to do the week after next. Okay, so Scenario Manager is what we're going to be working with. Okay, we're going to create a new one, so we're going to add, we're going to call this one Reduced Contributions. Okay. The range of cells that we're going to be changing are E14 to E17, so my rate's here, and I'm going to click OK, and it's going to say, all right, what are the rates that you want it to be? So we're going to say, instead of 0.08, we're going to go 0.07. Instead of 11, we're going to 0.10. Instead of 13, we're going to go 0.12 for 12. Instead of 15, we're going to have 0.14 for 14. And if I wanted to add another one, I could do that. I'm going to click OK, and I've created that scenario. I'm going to click on Summary. Okay, and the result I want is L5 to L9. So what I want to see is I want to see what the changes is on their net wages. I'm going to click OK. So what you can see now is it shows me a scenario. So there's my current view, 8%, 11, 13, and 15. And there's how much my net wages are based on those rates. And here's what my net wages change to if I was to change those rates. So that's, in effect, that's what Scenario Manager does. Creates a brand new worksheet, and in that worksheet I've got my comparisons so that I can take a visual look to see. Now, granted, I could have simply gone in here and changed that to 7, that to 10, that to 12, and that to 14, or whatever the heck the numbers were, 7, 10, 12, and 14. If I change that to 7, it's going to change this because it's going to change my net wages, because my net wages are based on my retirement, which is going to change when I change the retirement rate, if you understand all of that. All right, so let's go back through that again. My retirement rate is based on my gross wages times the retirement rate, and that's based on my term. So for a 3-term, my retirement rate is 13%. I'm getting paid $1,100. If that rate was to change, then my retirement rate changes, my gross wages go up because I'm paying out less money on my benefit. Okay, so I could, instead of using the scenario manager, I could simply change these numbers and then see what the results are. But the problem with that is that if I forget to change one of them back, we have a problem. So with Scenario Manager, what it allows me to do is to see the effect of those changes without actually changing the numbers. So I can see there's what the results are based on these contribution rates. Okay. Now let me show you a better example. If I'm going to go to Scenario Demo over here, and this is looking at the cost of buying a car. Okay. So when I buy a car, I'm going to buy a car for $30,000. I'm going to put $5,000 down, so I'm borrowing $25,000 at an interest rate of 3.9% for 5 years. So my monthly loan payment is $459.29, and my total interest rate is, or total interest paid over the course of the 5 years is $2,557.19. So let me try some different scenarios here. So we're going to create a scenario. So I'm going to go to Data, What If Analysis, Scenario Manager, and I'm going to create a new scenario called Increased Down Payment. And the value that the cell that I'm going to be changing is my down payment, and I'm going to change it from $5,000 to $7,000. Okay, and I'm going to add another one. This one I'm going to call Lower Interest Rate. So the cell that I'm changing is going to be my interest rate, and I'm going to change that to 0.25 or 0.025, so 2.5%, which would be pretty good these days. All right, I'm going to create a new one. I'm going to call this Longer Term. So the cell that I'm changing is going to be my term. And I'm going to say, instead of going for 5 years, I'm going to go for 7 years. Okay. Then I'm going to click Summary. And the cell that I want to look at is my total, is here, and my total interest. Okay, so here now I can see there's my current value. If I have a $5,000 down payment at 3.9% for 5 years, I'm paying $459 a month. My total interest is $2,500. If I have a bigger down payment, I have a $7,000 down payment, so $2,000 more, I'm going to be paying $200 less interest, and I'm going to be paying $20 or $30 a month less. If I have a lower interest rate at 2.5%, going back to the $5,000 down payment, my 2.5 versus 3.9, my interest or my payment drops to $443, and my interest drops from $2,500 to $1,600. And if I go to a 7-year term at the original 3.9%, then my payment drops from $459 to $340, but my total interest goes from $2,500 to $3,600. So I pay $1,000 more in interest. Okay, so that just gives you an example of what you're capable of doing with Scenario Manager. I could have done all of those things simply by going back to my here and simply changing the numbers. I could have changed that to $7,000, and I could have seen what the result was. I could have then gone back, changed that back to $5,000, changed the interest rate to 2.5, and I would have seen the same sort of results. The trouble with that is I keep changing the original numbers, and sometimes you want to keep those original numbers and then just see the different values that are happening. So anyway, that is Scenario Manager. let's go back to payroll. Okay, so skill number 7 is estimating future value. So what future value is the value of an investment with a set contribution rate, either over a set period of time, so either monthly, weekly, bi-weekly, bi-monthly, annually, quarterly, or whatever, over a set period of time. Okay, so what we want to do is in this range of cells, I want to calculate what this person's pension is going to be worth at the end of 20 years. The piece of information that I need to know is how much are they putting in each month, how much do they currently have in there, what's my term, so it's 20 years, and what's the interest rate, 4.8%. Based on all of those calculations, I can calculate what that pension will be worth in 20 years. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to click here, and I'm going to go to formulas. Future value is a financial function, so here it is here. So my interest rate is 4.8%, but it's very important that you recognize that when you're calculating, if you look down at the bottom where it says rate is the interest rate per period. For example, use 6% divided by 4 for quarterly payments at 6%. The interest rate that you seeing here at 4.8% is an annual interest rate, but they are making contributions monthly. So my interest rate is not 4.8% per month, which would be a hell of a rate if you can get it, but their actual interest rate is going to be 4.8% divided by 12. So because I'm making monthly payments, I divide the interest rate by 12. The number of payments, I'm going to be doing this for 20 years, but again, that's 20 years, not 20 months. So I have to multiply that by 12 to get the total number of payments, 240. The payment that I'm paying in each and every month is my retirement contribution. And my present value is how much is the loan currently worth. So I currently have $28,440 saved up. When I hit OK, I get a negative $131,574. Just so you understand that in Excel, whenever you are doing calculations on future value or payment, it'll always show your result as a negative number. And the premise being that, it's money, well, it doesn't matter. So to change it from a negative to a positive, I'm going to go up here to the formula bar, and I'm simply going to put a negative sign in between the equal sign and the F of future value. And that's simply, if you want to change a negative number to a positive, you multiply it by negative 1. If I want to take a positive number to a negative, I multiply it by negative 1. Okay, so as soon as I multiply that by negative 1, I have, so what this is saying is that $143 a month for 20 years at 4.8%, starting at $28,000, is going to be worth $131,000 in 20 years. And I can take that and copy it down. Okay, all right. Whoop, what did I do wrong? Oh, that should be right. But no, because this should be a lot higher. Okay, what did I do wrong here? All right, so the interest rate. Oh, okay. Now, perfect. So what I forgot to do here is that interest rate is an absolute reference, right? Because I didn't change that to an absolute reference. Then when I copied the formula down, it changed it from the interest rate from 4.8% to 0.0000. Okay, so I'm going to select that, and I'm going to hit F4 to make that an absolute reference. And now I'll copy it down, and that looks much better. Okay, all right, and that's even though I did screw it up, it's a really good example for you that you've really got to always, when you enter a formula in Excel, always take a look at your results to make sure that they make sense. So basically, I looked here and said this person had $28,000 and they ended up with 131. This person had $32,000 and they ended up with 66. Well, obviously there was something wrong because This guy had 131 and he had less money. So there was a problem. That's when I went back into the formula, realized that I had not made 4.8% an absolute reference. So you always have to double check your formulas for that they make sense. Okay. Skill number 8 is array formulas. And array formulas, I've got a whole bunch of stuff in here. You can see I've got a thing here called array demo. I'm not even going to bother with it because it's just not something we do that often. Array formulas are functions are just allow you to add. Okay, let's take a look here. I want the total allowances here. So my total allowances are going to be my stipends plus my auto allowances. So this plus this is going to give me this. And then I would just simply take the fill handle and copy it down. Well, with an array formula, what you have to do is you highlight the range, and then the end result. Then I put in, it's been so long since I've done it, I forget myself here. I'm going to hit the equal sign, and then I'm going to highlight my first range, and then I'm going to hit plus my second range, and then I'm going to do a Control Shift Enter. Okay, so basically what I have done is I highlight where I want it to go, then I hit equal sign to tell it I'm starting a formula, then I highlight the first range plus the second range. But the trick to an array function is that you have to finish it with Control plus Shift plus Enter. And what an array function will do is it'll simply do the first row, the second row, third row, fourth row, fifth row, and so on as it works through. If you look up in the formula bar, you can see that it shows that's interesting. When you click on the formula bar, it takes them away. It has squiggly brackets at the start and at the end. I don't know what the hell you're supposed to call those. I'll just call them squiggly brackets. And then your function in between. That's called a CSE function. Control Shift Enter to do that. Okay. So they're doing the same thing here. So they're going to D20. So here I'm going to do a equals sum, E5 to E9, plus F5 to F9. Okay, and then Control Shift Enter to get my total. And again, I could have simply gone up and done it by adding them together. Okay, same thing here, equals sum bracket I5 to I9. Where are we here? I5 to I9 plus J5 to J9 plus K5 to K9, Control Shift Enter. Okay. All right. So I'm not even sure I put those in the right spot. So no, I didn't. So yeah, those should have gone over here and over here. But you know what? It doesn't matter. You're not going to get tested on array functions. There may be an array function in your grader assignment here, but there will be no array function in your final assignment. You're in your final test. So I'm just basically showing it to you, so if you ever happen to see a function with squiggly brackets on it, you'll know that it was an array function, and it's just somebody trying to prove how smart they are, because you could have done it a different way. Okay. Skill number 9 is conditional sums. So skill number 9 and skill number 10 are conditional sums. We're going to do a SUMIF and a SUMIF-S. Okay, these are a little bit more confusing. If I go back to my COUNTIF function, so remember here we did a COUNTIF function, and what the COUNTIF function said, look in this range for this number, and every time you find it, add 1 to a counter and then tell me how many you see. So it said I had one term I had nobody, 2 terms I had 2, 3 terms I had 2, 4 terms I had 1. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do a SUMIF function. All right, so click on B20. Oh, okay, I'm going to get rid of the ones that I put in here because I put them in the wrong spot. So what I want to know here is the total All right, so what I want to know here is my total allowance, or total stipends. So there's my stipends here. So if it's RA, it's $600 plus $600 plus $600. So the answer is $1,800. Okay, I'm going to change this to show RA and HA. Just makes it a little bit more, because that's what we're looking for here. When they developed the assignments, they hard coded into the functions where they could have done it differently. Anyway, so what I want to look at for here is I want to look in this range for, at first we're going to looking for RA. So I'm going to find RA, and then I'm going to go across here and add that number up. Then I'm going to do there's another RA there and another RA there. Okay, so I'm going to go back to, and I think SUMIF is in math functions. Yep. So there's SUMIF. So again, it's saying range and criteria. So a range is, where am I looking? I'm looking here. What am I looking for? Oh, and I have to make that an absolute reference. No, I don't, because I'm not going to be copying it. So it doesn't, yeah, actually I can. Make that an absolute reference. What am I looking for? I'm looking for this. And when I find it, I want it to add up the corresponding value from here, and I'm going to make that an absolute reference as well. Okay? So there's my function. The SUMIF is saying look in here for RA. When you find it, go across to here and add up the corresponding values. So there's 600, 600, 600. Okay, so it looks in here, it finds the RA, and it adds up to 600. Then it goes down further, it finds the RA, adds the 600, finds the RA, adds the 600. All right, so now I can take my fill handle, copy it down, because this one is going to be looking for, in that same range, it's looking in here, and what it's looking for is this. So it's looking, so there it finds it there, so there's 350, and there's another 350, so there's my 700, that's it, and it returns my 700. So that is the SUMIF function. Now SUMIFS is basically the same thing, but it allows you to search for more than one thing. So we're going to go to I-20. So what we're looking for here is, okay, now let me just go back here. So I'm going to go back to here for a second. I'm going to look at the SUMIF function. So what it's saying is there's the range and there's the criteria. So it looks in that range for this, and when it finds it, it adds up the corresponding value here. SUMIFS is a little bit different. So basically what we're looking for here is we want to know the total value of future retirement if current value is greater than 30 and high value is true. So if the value in this range is greater than $30,000 and the value of here is the word true. So it's going to say not greater, not greater, not greater, is greater, oh, and is true, so then it's going to add that value. Then it's going to say greater than 30 and true, so it's going to add those two together to come up with my result, and that's going to display here. Okay, so we're going to go back to Math and Trig. We're going to go down, find SUMIFS. So the difference on this function is when you did the SUMIF function, you did the range first, and then you did the criteria. In this one, we're going to do it different. We're going to actually add the value. So this is the sum range, right? And I'm not going to be copying this anywhere, so I'm not going to have to worry about absolute references. My criteria range is I'm looking in here, and what I'm looking for greater than 30,000. My second criteria, I'm looking in here, and I'm looking for the word true. Okay, and just a point of fact here, when you're entering criteria into dialog boxes, they are not case sensitive. So if you type lowercase true, uppercase true, all uppercase true, it will all work the same way. All right, I'm going to hit OK, and it gives me a value of 312,441, which is the sum total of these two values right there. whoops, 312, 441. Okay. All right, so SUMIF, you add the range, the criteria, and then you tell it what value, what cells to add up. SUMIF-S, you tell it the cells you want to add first, then you do the criteria and what the criteria is, the criteria range, the criteria range, and the criteria. Okay, and the final one is average, which is exactly the same as SUMIF, it just does an average. So I'm going to go to I-21 here. I'm going to average high value. So again, we want to average J14, J18. Yeah, so we're going to do the same thing. So I'm going to go to Math and Trig. Now this one's actually in statistical, I think. Yeah, there it is. Average if S. And we're going to say my average range is this. So I'm going to average this. My criteria is this greater than 30,000 and high value equals true. And you don't need to put the equal sign in, it's assumed. I click OK. Okay? All right, so that's it. We're done for another week.